Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're digging into a crucial explainer right at the intersection of public health and public safety, and that is correctional health care. Specifically, we're looking at Delaware's Unified Strategy for Medication-Assisted Treatment, or MAT. We're going to uncover exactly what happens to individuals treating substance use disorders while they're in custody, and crucially, what happens the moment they leave. Okay, let's dive right into this. What actually happens when treatment just stops the second someone walks out of a correctional facility? Well, the reality is, it creates a literal life or death scenario. For a long time, the gap between the healthcare provided inside a facility and the healthcare available out in the community has been this massive blind spot in the justice system. We are talking about a critical transition period where the stakes literally could not be higher. To understand why those stakes are so incredibly high, we have to look at the biology of substance use alongside the environment of incarceration itself. When someone is in custody, their physical tolerance to substances, particularly opioids, drastically drops. It's basically a physiological reset. So if an individual returns to substance use immediately after release, they are facing an incredibly dangerous situation. Using the exact same amount of a substance post-release that they might have comfortably used prior to incarceration now triggers a massive and very often fatal overdose risk.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll unpack the post-release risk, define MAT, explore Delaware's unified system advantage, trace their statewide rollout, look at the balance of treatment and security, and finally, re-entry and continuity.
All right, Section 1, the post-release overdose risk. To truly grasp the impact of Delaware's solution, we first need to firmly understand the danger on the ground. The data tells a very clear story here. People in jails and prisons experience disproportionately high rates of substance use disorder. And, as we just touched on, the controlled environment of a correctional facility means a person's physical tolerance plummets. This makes the immediate reentry period an incredibly vulnerable time. Any effective treatment approach isn't just about managing health inside the facility. It has to directly address this post-release public safety crisis. If the system ignores the transition back into society, it completely ignores the highest window of risk. Moving on to Section 2, defining medication-assisted treatment. Medication-assisted treatment, or MAT, is a widely recognized evidence-based public health tool. But it's really vital to understand that it is absolutely not simply swapping one drug for another. MAT is a comprehensive approach. It carefully combines FDA-approved medications with behavioral counseling and ongoing recovery support to treat substance use disorders. And this brilliantly illustrates how these components actually work in tandem. Step 1 is the clinical side. FDA-approved medications are administered to physically reduce grueling withdrawal symptoms and stabilize those intense cravings. Once the body and brain are chemically stabilized, we move right to Step 2, which is counseling and recovery support. This allows the individual to actively and effectively engage in behavioral therapy. In a correctional setting, this two-step process improves health outcomes inside the facility and drastically improves the chances that a person will continue their treatment journey after their release. Which brings us to Section 3, Delaware's Unified System Advantage. Delaware serves as a perfect case study here, largely because of its government structure. Unlike the standard patchwork model you see in most states, where fragmented county jails and state prisons create these massive administrative walls, Delaware operates a unified system. Their Department of Correction manages both adult detention and correctional services for the entire state. This unified umbrella builds a massive advantage for healthcare delivery. Because Delaware doesn't have to fight through constant county-to-state jurisdictional friction, they can align their MAT policies across the entire correctional continuum. Whether someone is in pretrial detention, serving a sentence, moving to a work release center, or prepping for reentry, they remain under one unified healthcare umbrella. It makes standardizing the screening, prescribing, and monitoring infinitely easier, and essentially prevents individuals from falling through those jurisdictional cracks. Section 4, Statewide Expansion and Implementation. The timeline of their rollout is remarkably swift and highly organized. In 2019, the Delaware DOC announced they were expanding MAT to Level 5 prison facilities across the entire state. Level 5, for context, is their 24-hour incarceration level. By 2020, just 1 year later, MAT was available in literally every prison and work release facility statewide. And by 2023, they launched a redesigned statewide program called Road to Recovery, which substantially increased MAT access for incarcerated individuals. They transitioned this from a limited small-scale offering into a comprehensive statewide health strategy in just a few short years. And they achieved this rapid growth by refusing to treat MAT as some niche side project. MAT is deeply integrated directly into Delaware's Bureau of Healthcare, Substance Abuse, and Mental Health Services. They utilize specific contracts for care in both Level 5 and Level 4 community-based settings. The entire system is built on evidence-based programming, strict compliance, and accreditation standards. The overarching goal here is a systematic approach that successfully matches a person's specific treatment to their unique risk and need.
Section 5. Balancing treatment and security.
So the crucial point is, how do you safely run a complex medical program inside a prison? Well, it requires a delicate, constant balance with institutional safety. Facilities face incredibly pragmatic operational hurdles every single day. They have to manage strict medication security and handle clinical staffing constraints. They must vigilantly guard against diversion risks, which is when medication is illicitly shared or sold among the incarcerated population. They also have to maintain rigorous contraband control and ensure that when an individual transfers between custody levels, their daily medication doesn't just get lost in the shuffle. Treatment simply has to coexist with strict security rules. Safe MAT delivery heavily depends on those institutional controls. For example, Delaware has recently placed a major emphasis on mail screening to mitigate the risks of illicit drugs entering their facilities. Keeping contraband out is literally just as vital to a successful substance use treatment program as the clinical care itself. The medical and security teams absolutely have to work hand in glove.
And finally, Section 6, Re-entry and Continuity.
This is where we bridge the gap from the cell block back to the neighborhood. Now, you might be wondering, why does all this matter to you and me? Because virtually everyone in these facilities will eventually return to our communities. But upon release, they face extremely steep systemic barriers. They often walk out to unstable housing situations, interrupted health insurance coverage, and heavily limited access to community medical providers. If treatment stops at the prison gate because of these barriers, the risk of relapse and a fatal overdose absolutely skyrockets. Delaware tackles these massive barriers by aiming for true continuity. The best MAT programs out there don't just dispense medication. They identify individuals in need early at intake, they continue uninterrupted treatment throughout custody, and, crucially, they connect individuals to community care before release. Delaware's DOC explicitly ties substance use treatment to their discharge and reentry planning. Furthermore, since the DOC also supervises the state's probation population, they can seamlessly bridge treatment from institutional custody right into community supervision. There is a quote from the source material that perfectly distills what you should take away from this explainer today. Medication-assisted treatment in jails and prisons is not just a medical issue. It is also a public safety issue, a reentry issue, and a continuity of care issue. By keeping treatment consistent from intake to release, a unified system doesn't just improve the health of the individual, it actively protects the broader communities those individuals are returning to. Delaware has shown that by leveraging a unified structure, it is entirely possible to build a continuous bridge of care from the exact moment of intake to the day of release and beyond. It is no longer a niche idea there. It's a foundational pillar of their correctional health strategy. But it leaves us with a really compelling final thought. If this unified blueprint can effectively close the dangerous gap in correctional care, how will the rest of the country, with its fragmented patchwork systems, adapt to ensure that life-saving treatment doesn't stop at the prison gate? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Focused learners, I'll see you next time.